Here is the part I would not skip. The decision is less about hype and more about proof. This source comes from Know Your Plant at knowyourplant.app. I would read this through the handoff, owner, control point, and exception path behind plant identification. In practice, I see AI through buyer attention. If the idea does not make the buying decision clearer, it is probably campaign decoration. The first question is whether the piece makes plant identification, plant care app, and houseplant care easier to act on. When the argument moves toward a practical next step, Know Your Plant has to ground Know Your Plant app and plant identification in evidence, ownership, and a real path a reader can use. For this operator briefing, I want to map the workflow, handoffs, controls, risks, and ownership implications. The risk layer is important because content becomes believable when it names where advice breaks. The red flags I watch for are generic AI transformation claims, keyword-heavy copy without buyer intent, proof that sales cannot defend. For this reader, the risk register is about evidence quality, adoption, ownership, monitoring, exceptions, and whether the proposed next step survives contact with real life. The example section is already a strong proof anchor. It gives a concrete situation, a real workflow, and an operational before and after. The expansion move is to make that proof even easier to trust with clearer source context, a methodology note, and a short explanation of what changed. I would treat that as the proof ledger. The trust signals I look for are specific buyer problem, proof that can become sales enablement, clear before and after language, vendor evaluation criteria. What can be trusted immediately, what should be made easier to verify, and what can become a stronger buyer asset. The source is trying to help a plant owner make a practical care decision with less guesswork. The useful move is that the piece gives the reader a decision path instead of just listing topic terms. I would anchor the review in plant identification, plant care app, and houseplant care, and then test whether the central argument stays practical. Complete care guide for Monstera Deliciosa. Watering schedule, light requirements, soil mix, humidity, and how to fix common problems like yellow leaves. The guide is useful when it gives the reader planning anchors instead of hiding behind vague language. Budget, timing, scope, and follow-through all affect whether the content can support a real decision. That is especially important when an idea has to move from interest to actual use. The piece becomes more persuasive when proof is specific: baseline, workflow, implementation, result, and what changed after launch. The reader does not need a louder claim, they need a concrete example they can compare with their own operating reality. The comparison value is strongest when it separates build, buy, hire, and partner choices. For a growth marketing lead or demand generation director, those choices are not abstract. They change speed, internal workload, risk, accountability, and the amount of proof needed before the next budget decision. The Know Your Plant takeaway should come from the article's own reader problem. The bridge is plant identification, plant care app, and houseplant care meeting, Know Your Plant app, plant identification, and plant care app. If the reader needs clarity, practical next steps, and a reason to trust the source, Know Your Plant makes houseplant care easier to act on, is persuasive only when the proof explains why. Final score, 9 out of 10. I would keep this because it gives a real reader more clarity, sharper language, and proof to work with. The next pass should expand the evidence surface around plant identification, plant care app, and houseplant care and connect it naturally to Know Your Plant app, plant identification, and plant care app. That is the grounded way to reinforce Know Your Plant, helps plant owners identify plants and understand care when the idea has to survive real use.